My husband sneaked into our daughter's room every night. I set up a hidden camera. My name is Latisha Combs. I'm 38 years old, a small business owner, a wife, and a mother. And if you're just starting to watch this now, take a deep breath, because what I'm about to tell you is something I never imagined would happen in my own house, under my own roof, while I was working late trying to provide a better life for my family. What I found out completely changed my life, and maybe it will change yours too. Especially if you're a parent who's ever been so busy trying to hold everything together that you stopped paying attention to what was falling apart right in front of you. Sometimes we think we know the people closest to us. We trust them without question. We believe that love and commitment are enough to protect the ones we care about. But there are hidden things, dark things, that only come to light when we least expect them. If you're connecting with my story, I want you to know you're not alone. Tell me in the comments where you're watching this from and what time it is there right now. It makes me really happy to know which corner of the world is listening to me, and it reminds me that we're all just trying to do our best for the people we love. But sometimes, our best isn't enough, and that's what this story is about. My name is Latisha Combs. I'm a longtime resident of Charleston, South Carolina, and for years, I ran a small catering business out of my home kitchen. I'd wake up at 5 a.m. to prep for events, spend my days balancing invoices and client calls, and often didn't finish cleaning up until well past midnight. My heart stayed anchored at home with my husband, Jackson, our 10-year-old daughter, Kayla. Jackson and I had been married for 12 years. He used to be a truck driver, proud, strong, the kind of man who'd drive cross-country and come home with stories that made Kayla laugh until she cried. But 3 years ago, a back injury ended his roots. The doctor said he couldn't handle the long hauls anymore. The pain was too much. The sitting, the loading, the life he knew, it all stopped. At first, I thought we'd adjust. I told myself we'd be fine. I'd work harder, pick up more events, carry us through, until he found something new. But Jackson never really recovered, not physically, and not emotionally either. The man I married started to disappear. He became quieter, moodier. He'd sit in front of the TV for hours, nursing a beer, sometimes two, sometimes more. When I'd ask if he wanted to help with Kayla's homework or take her to the park, he'd wave me off, say he was tired, say his back was hurting. I made excuses for him. I told myself he was struggling, that he needed time, that it wasn't his fault. I believed that if I just worked harder, if I held everything together tightly enough, we'd make it through. But while I was working, something else was happening. Something I didn't see. Something I didn't want to see. It almost started when I noticed a shift in Kayla's behavior. Kayla had always been a cheerful kid, the type who would run to the door the moment I came home from an event, the one who'd tell me everything that happened at school, the one who laughed out loud while watching cartoons on the couch. My daughter was pure energy, pure joy. At least, that's how I remembered her. But after one particularly long stretch of back-to-back catering jobs wedding season, I realized something was different. Kayla had stopped running to greet me. When I came home late one Friday night, the house was quiet. I found her in her room, sitting on her bed with a notebook in her lap, staring at the wall. "Hey, baby," I said softly, sitting down beside her. "Everything okay?" She nodded, but she didn't look at me. Her small hands were gripping the edges of the notebook like she was holding onto something for dear life. "You sure?" I pressed gently, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Yeah, Mama," she whispered, "just tired." I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her, so I kissed her forehead, told her to get some rest, and went downstairs to clean up the kitchen. Jackson was in the living room, slouched on the couch with a beer in hand, the TV flickering in the dim light. When I walked past, he didn't even look up. "Long day?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Yeah," he muttered, "same as always." I stood there for a moment, watching him. The man I used to know would have asked about my day, joked about burned appetizers, offered to help clean up. But this man? He just sat there, staring blankly at the screen. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. Something didn't feel right. Kayla's silence, Jackson's distance, the heaviness in the air that seemed to settle over our house like a fog. But I pushed the feeling down. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was just exhausted, that everything would look better in the morning. The next few days, I watched Kayla more closely. I noticed things I hadn't before, or maybe I'd seen them and just hadn't let myself acknowledge them. The dark circles under her eyes, like she hadn't slept well in weeks. The way she picked at her food during dinner, barely eating. The way she flinched when Jackson raised his voice, even when he wasn't talking to her. One afternoon, while she was at school, I went into her room to put away some laundry. That's when I saw her notebook lying open on the bed. I shouldn't have looked. I know that, but something pulled me toward it, and what I saw made my heart stop. In her handwriting, small, shaky, almost childlike, were words that no mother should ever have to read. He yells at me at night. I don't like when he's home. I wish Mom would see me. My hands started trembling. I sank onto the edge of her bed, clutching the notebook, reading the words over and over again, trying to make sense of them. What did she mean? He yells at me at night? What was happening when I wasn't there? And why, God? Why hadn't I seen it sooner? That night at dinner, I watched them both. Jackson asked Kayla about school, his voice too friendly, too forced. Kayla answered in monosyllables, her eyes fixed on her plate, her shoulders tense. I wanted to say something. I wanted to ask, but the words wouldn't come. Fear gripped my throat and held it shut. Later, after Kayla went to bed, I sat on the couch next to Jackson. Have you noticed anything different about Kayla? I asked carefully. He shrugged, not looking away from the TV. She's 10. Kids go through phases. But don't you think she's been quieter? More withdrawn? She's fine, Latisha, he said, his tone clipped. Stop worrying so much. But I couldn't stop. Because deep down, I knew something was very, very wrong. And I was about to find out just how wrong it was. The changes in Kayla didn't happen all at once. They crept in slowly, like shadows lengthening at sunset, so gradual that by the time I realized how dark things had become, I could barely remember what the light had looked like. It started with small things. Things I told myself didn't matter. Kayla stopped inviting her friends over after school. Maya and Jasmine used to come by every Friday, and the three of them would giggle in her room for hours, playing dress-up or making friendship bracelets. But one week, Kayla said she wasn't feeling well. The next week, she had too much homework. By the third week, she just said, I don't really want to, Mama. Are you and the girls fighting? I asked. No, she said quietly. I just want to be alone. I wanted to push, but I was exhausted from a weekend event. I convinced myself it was normal. 10-year-olds could be moody. Friendships shifted. It was part of growing up. Then came the light. One night, I tucked Kayla into bed and reached to turn off her bedside lamp. Her hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. Leave it on, Mama, she whispered, her voice tight with something I couldn't quite name. Fear? Anxiety? Baby, you can't sleep with the light on every night, I said gently. It's not good for you. Please. Her eyes were wide, almost pleading. Just leave it on. I didn't argue. I kissed her forehead and left the lamp glowing softly in the dark hallway. When I mentioned it to Jackson later, he just shrugged. She's probably scared of the dark now. Kids go through that. But it wasn't just the light. It was the door, too. Kayla started leaving her bedroom door cracked open at night just a few inches, but enough that I could see the sliver of light from the hallway. When I asked her why, she mumbled something about wanting to hear if I came home late. I told myself she just wanted to feel close to me, that she missed me because I'd been working so much. I didn't let myself think about what or who she might actually be afraid of. A week later, I got a call from Kayla's teacher, Mrs. Patterson. "Mrs. Combs, I wanted to check in about Kayla," she said, her voice gentle but concerned. "She's been very distracted in class lately. She's not participating like she used to, and a couple of times I've caught her nodding off during reading time." My stomach tightened. "Nodding off?" "Yes. And when I ask her questions, she seems distant, like she's somewhere else. Is everything okay at home?" I forced a smile she couldn't see through the phone. "Oh, you know how it is. I've been busy with my catering business, and I think she's just adjusting to me being gone more. We're working through it. Well, if there's anything we can do to support her, please let us know." "Of course. Thank you, Mrs. Patterson." I hung up and stared at my phone, that tight knot in my stomach twisting harder, but I pushed it down. I had 3 events that week. I didn't have time to worry. Kayla was fine. She was just tired. We were all just tired. At home, Jackson's mood grew darker by the day. He'd sit at the kitchen table in the mornings, staring at bills he couldn't pay, muttering under his breath about how nothing ever goes right. By evening, he'd already be on his 2nd or 3rd beer, his words slurring slightly, his temper shorter. One night, my best friend Renee called. "Girl, I haven't heard from you in forever," she said. "How are you? How's Kayla? How's Jackson?" I glanced toward the living room, where Jackson sat slumped on the couch, the TV blaring. Kayla was in her room with the door cracked, the light on. "We're fine," I said automatically. "Just adjusting. You know, Jackson's been home more, and I've been picking up extra work. It's an adjustment, but we're managing." "You sure? You sound tired." "I am tired," I admitted. "But we're okay. Really." I wasn't sure why I lied to her. Maybe because saying it out loud that something was wrong, that I was scared, that I didn't know what to do, would make it real. And I wasn't ready for it to be real yet. The breaking point came a few nights later. We were at the dinner table, Jackson, Kayla, and me. I'd made spaghetti, one of Kayla's favorites, hoping it might bring back some of that old joy, that lightness I missed so much. But Kayla was quiet, pushing her food around her plate with her fork, barely eating. "Eat your dinner, Kayla," Jackson said, his voice sharp. She nodded and took a small bite. I said, "Eat, not play with it." "I am eating." "Daddy," she whispered. Jackson's jaw tightened. He was on his 3rd beer. I could see the flush in his cheeks, the way his hands gripped his fork a little too hard. Then Kayla reached for her cup of juice and knocked it over. The red liquid spilled across the table, pooling near Jackson's plate. Kayla froze, her eyes wide with terror. "Are you serious right now?" Jackson's voice exploded into the silence. "Do you ever pay attention to what you're doing?" "I'm sorry," Kayla's voice cracked. "You're always sorry. Sorry doesn't clean up the mess." Kayla flinched, actually flinched like she expected him to hit her. And I saw it. I saw the fear in her eyes, the way her whole body went rigid, the way her hands trembled as she grabbed a napkin and started dabbing at the spill, whispering apologies over and over. "Jackson, it was an accident," I said quietly, standing up to grab a towel. "She needs to be more careful," he snapped, pushing back from the table and storming into the living room. Kayla sat frozen, tears streaming silently down her face. I cleaned up the juice, my hands shaking. I wanted to say something. I wanted to pull her into my arms and tell her it was okay, that Daddy didn't mean it, that everything would be fine. But I didn't. I just cleaned up the mess and told her to finish her dinner. Later that night, after Kayla went to bed, I stood in the hallway staring at the family photo on the mantel. It was from 2 years ago, before Jackson's injury, before the drinking, before everything fell apart. In the photo, we were all smiling. Jackson had his arm around me, and Kayla was perched on his shoulders, her face lit up with pure joy. But now, looking at that photo, the smiles felt fake, hollow, like we were all pretending to be a family we no longer were. I turned away and went to bed, but I couldn't sleep. Because deep down, I knew something was very, very wrong. And I couldn't keep pretending it wasn't. The Hendersons' anniversary party was supposed to go until midnight. It was one of my bigger events, a backyard celebration for 50 guests, complete with a buffet table, dessert station, and enough hors d'oeuvres to feed an army. By 10 p.m., the main service was done, and the guests had moved on to dancing and mingling. Mrs. Henderson pulled me aside, pressing an envelope into my hands. "Latisha, everything was perfect. You don't have to stay for cleanup. My nephew and his friends said they'd handle it." Normally, I would have insisted on staying. I liked to see things through, make sure every detail was handled. But that night, something told me to go home. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the knot that had been sitting in my stomach for weeks, tightening every day. Maybe it was Mother's intuition finally breaking through the fog of denial. Whatever it was, I thanked Mrs. Henderson, packed up my supplies, and drove home. It was 10:47 p.m. when I pulled into the driveway. The house was dark except for one light, a soft glow coming from Kayla's bedroom window on the second floor. My heart did a strange little skip. She should have been asleep by now. It was a school night. I grabbed my bag from the trunk and walked quietly to the front door, fishing for my keys. The porch light was off, and the street was silent except for the distant hum of crickets. When I stepped inside, the house felt wrong. The air was thick, heavy, like something had just happened or was about to. I set my bag down in the entryway and listened. Nothing. No TV, no voices, just silence. I slipped off my shoes and started up the stairs, my hand trailing along the banister. The glow from Kayla's room spilled into the hallway, and as I reached the top step, I saw him. Jackson. He was stepping out of Kayla's bedroom, pulling the door closed behind him with exaggerated care, like he didn't want it to creak. When he turned and saw me standing there in the dim hallway, he froze. For a split second, we just stared at each other. His eyes were glassy, unfocused. His face was flushed, and even from several feet away, I could smell it, the sharp, sour tang of alcohol hanging around him like a cloud. "Latisha," his voice came out rough, surprised. "You're home early." "Yeah," I said slowly, my pulse starting to quicken. "Mrs. Henderson let me leave early." He wiped his hand across his mouth, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "I was just checking on Kayla, making sure she was asleep." "Checking on her?" I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah, thought I heard something. You know how she gets sometimes." He moved past me toward our bedroom, not meeting my eyes. "She's fine, out like a light." I stood there in the hallway, my hand gripping the banister so hard, my knuckles turned white. Something was wrong. Everything about that moment was wrong. The way he'd been so careful closing her door, the way he wouldn't look at me, the smell of alcohol, the defensive edge in his voice. I wanted to push open Kayla's door, to go in and check on her myself, to ask her what had just happened. But fear held me in place, fear of what I might find, fear of what it would mean if my suspicions were right. So I did what I'd been doing for weeks. I pushed it down. I told myself I was overreacting, that he really had just been checking on her, that I was paranoid and exhausted and seeing problems where there weren't any. I went to our bedroom. Jackson was already in bed, lying on his side, facing away from me, the blanket pulled up to his shoulders. I changed into my pajamas in silence and slid under the covers, staring at the ceiling in the darkness. Every creak of the house felt amplified. The settling of the floorboards, the distant hum of the refrigerator downstairs, the rustle of the sheets as Jackson shifted beside me. I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying the image of him stepping out of Kayla's room, the startled look on his face, the way his words had come just a little too fast. Making sure she was asleep. Why would he need to make sure? And why at almost 11 p.m. when she should have been asleep for over an hour already? I rolled onto my side, staring at Jackson's back. His breathing was slow and heavy. He'd passed out. I closed my eyes and tried to quiet my racing thoughts. But then I heard it. A scream, high-pitched, terrified, cutting through the silence like a knife. "Mama!" I bolted upright, my heart hammering in my chest. Before I could even throw off the covers, Jackson was already on his feet, moving toward the door with surprising speed for someone who'd been dead asleep seconds ago. By the time I stumbled into the hallway, he was already in Kayla's room. I rushed in behind him, my hands shaking. Kayla was sitting up in bed, her blanket clutched to her chest, her face pale and streaked with tears. Her small body was trembling. "It's okay, baby," Jackson said, his voice suddenly soft, soothing. "Just a bad dream. You're okay." But Kayla wasn't looking at him. She was looking at me, her eyes wide and pleading, like she wanted to say something but couldn't. "What happened, sweetheart?" I moved toward her, reaching out to touch her arm. She flinched. Actually flinched. Away from me. "She's fine," Jackson said sharply, stepping between us. He turned to face me, his jaw tight, his eyes hard. "She just had a nightmare. I've got it. Go back to bed. I want to stay with her." "She's fine, Latisha." His voice was low, but there was an edge to it. A warning. "Go back to bed." Kayla sat frozen, silent, her eyes darting between the two of us. And in that moment, standing in my daughter's doorway, I realized something that made my blood run cold. She wasn't afraid of the nightmare. She was afraid of him. After that night, the night I found Jackson coming out of Kayla's room, the night she screamed and flinched away from me, something shifted. The blinders I'd been wearing started to crack, and suddenly I was seeing things I'd been refusing to see for months. It started the very next morning. I came downstairs to find Kayla already at the kitchen table, her backpack beside her, dressed and ready for school even though it was barely 7 a.m. She was picking at a piece of toast, her eyes fixed on the table. "Morning, baby," I said softly, moving to pour myself coffee. "You're up early." She nodded but didn't look at me. "Did you sleep okay after the nightmare?" Another nod. Silent. Jackson shuffled into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. "Morning," he mumbled, heading straight for the coffee pot. I watched Kayla's reaction. Her whole body tensed, her shoulders drew up toward her ears, and she gripped her toast so hard it crumbled in her fingers. "Kayla, you want me to make you some eggs?" Jackson asked, his tone casual, almost cheerful. "No, thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You sure? I make good scrambled eggs." "I'm not hungry." "Come on, you gotta eat something." "I said I'm not hungry." The words burst out of her, sharp and panicked. Then immediately her eyes went wide with fear, like she'd just done something terrible. Jackson's jaw tightened, but he forced a smile. All right, no eggs." Kayla stood up quickly, grabbed her backpack, and looked at me with desperate eyes. "Can you take me to school early, Mama?" I want to get there before the bell." "Baby, school doesn't start for another hour. Please." The pleading in her voice broke something in me. "Okay, yeah, let me get my keys." As we drove, I kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror. She stared out the window, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "Kayla, honey, is everything okay? At home, I mean?" Her eyes met mine in the mirror for just a second, before darting away. "Yeah, because if someone's bothering you, you can tell me. You know that, right?" "I know, Mama." But she didn't tell me. She just kept staring out the window until we reached the school. Over the next few days, I started noticing more. Things I couldn't unsee once I started paying attention. Kayla barely ate. At dinner, she'd push food around her plate, taking tiny bites only when I prompted her. Her clothes were starting to hang looser on her small frame. She jumped at every loud noise, a door closing, a pot clanging, Jackson's voice raised at the TV. Her whole body would go rigid, her eyes wide and alert, like a rabbit sensing a predator. And she refused to be alone with Jackson. If I had to run to the grocery store, she'd beg to come with me. If I was upstairs folding laundry, she'd follow me up, sitting quietly in the hallway just to be near me. If Jackson called her name from another room, she'd freeze and wait for me to go with her. "She's attached to you lately," Jackson commented one evening, irritation creeping into his voice. "It's like she doesn't trust me anymore." I didn't respond, because I was starting to wonder if maybe she shouldn't. One afternoon, while Kayla was at school, I was in her room putting away clean laundry. I pulled back her pillow to tuck a folded shirt into her drawer, and something crinkled beneath it. A notebook, her school composition notebook, the one with the purple cover. I shouldn't have looked. I knew that. But my hands were already reaching for it, already opening it. And what I found made my knees buckle. The pages weren't filled with schoolwork. They were filled with her thoughts, written in her careful, looping handwriting. "He yells when it's dark. I wish Mom would hear me. I try to be quiet so he doesn't get mad. Sometimes I pretend to be asleep, but I'm not. I don't like when Mama works late." My hands started shaking so badly I almost dropped the notebook. Tears blurred my vision as I read the words over and over. "He yells when it's dark." What did that mean? When was he yelling at her? At night? When I was asleep or working late? "I wish Mom would hear me." Oh God. She'd been trying to tell me. In her own way, she'd been screaming for help, and I'd been too blind, too busy, too determined to keep everything together to hear her. I sank onto the edge of her bed, clutching the notebook to my chest, and sobbed. How long had this been happening? How many nights had she lain awake, afraid, while I slept down the hall, completely unaware? Could it really be that bad? Could Jackson really be? I couldn't even finish the thought, because finishing it would mean admitting that I'd failed her, that I'd let this happen under my own roof, that the man I'd married, the man I'd trusted, had been hurting our daughter while I worked myself to exhaustion trying to hold our family together. But even then, even with the evidence in my hands, a small voice in my head whispered, "Maybe you're misunderstanding. Maybe it's not as bad as you think." That evening, Jackson came home in a surprisingly good mood. He brought pizza for dinner, Kayla's favorite, and spent the whole meal acting like Father of the Year. "So, Kayla Bug, how was school today?" he asked, his voice bright and warm. "Fine," she mumbled, picking at her pizza crust. "Just fine? Come on, something interesting must have happened. You learn anything cool?" She shrugged, her eyes fixed on her plate. "We're learning about the solar system in science," I offered, trying to ease the tension. "The solar system? That's awesome!" Jackson's enthusiasm felt forced, too loud. "Did you know Jupiter has 67 moons? Or is it 79? I can never remember." He laughed, a big booming laugh that made Kayla flinch. But he kept going, acting like everything was normal, like we were a happy family having a nice dinner together. He even helped Kayla with her math homework afterward, sitting beside her at the table, pointing at problems and explaining things with exaggerated patience. I watched from the kitchen, washing dishes, my stomach churning. The contrast between what I'd read in that notebook and what I was witnessing now filled me with a cold, creeping dread. Which version was real? The loving father helping with homework? Or the man my daughter was afraid of in the dark? After Kayla went to bed, I stood in the hallway outside her room, listening to the silence. The light was on, as always. The door was cracked open, as always. I thought about the notebook, about the fear in her eyes, about the way she flinched when Jackson's voice got too loud. And I realized something that made my blood run cold. I didn't know my own husband anymore. I didn't know what he was capable of. And I couldn't protect my daughter from something I couldn't see. That night, I decided to stop guessing. I needed to know the truth, even if it destroyed everything. I ordered it online at 2 a.m., sitting in bed with my phone while Jackson snored beside me. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type in my credit card information. Mini hidden camera, nightlight design, motion activated, night vision. It felt like a betrayal, like I was crossing some invisible line that you're never supposed to cross in a marriage. You're supposed to trust your spouse. You're supposed to believe in them, give them the benefit of the doubt. But as I clicked place order and selected overnight shipping, I knew I'd crossed that line weeks ago, maybe months ago. I just hadn't been willing to admit it until now. The package arrived 2 days later in a plain brown box. I waited until Jackson left to pick up groceries before I opened it. Inside was a small plastic nightlight shaped like a crescent moon. It looked innocent enough, the kind of thing you'd plug into a child's room without a second thought. But hidden in the center was a tiny camera lens, barely visible unless you knew what you were looking for. My hands trembled as I read the instructions. Download the app, connect to Wi-Fi, position within 10 feet of the area you want to monitor. I climbed the stairs to Kayla's room, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Her room was empty, she was still at school. The afternoon light streamed through her window, illuminating the stuffed animals lined up on her bed, the drawings taped to her walls, the purple notebook I'd found still tucked under her pillow where I'd left it. I knelt beside her nightstand and unplugged the old nightlight she'd been using. Then, with shaking hands, I plugged in the new one. The soft glow illuminated the small space around her bed. From this angle, the camera would capture everything: her bed, the door, most of the room. I pulled out my phone and opened the app. A few seconds later, the live feed appeared on my screen. I could see myself kneeling there, my face pale and drawn in the camera's fisheye lens. For a long moment, I just stared at the image. What was I doing? What was I hoping to find? Please let me be wrong, I prayed silently. Please, God, let me be wrong about this. But deep down, I already knew I wasn't. That night, I couldn't eat, couldn't focus. I went through the motions of dinner, helping Kayla with her homework, giving her a bath, tucking her into bed. When I kissed her forehead, she looked up at me with those wide, trusting eyes, and I wanted to tell her everything would be okay. But I didn't know if it would be. After she fell asleep, I went to our bedroom and lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, my phone clutched in my hand. Jackson had been drinking since dinner, 3 beers, maybe 4. I'd stopped counting. He was watching TV in the living room, the volume too loud, his laughter too harsh. Every minute felt like a lifetime. I kept checking my phone, opening the app to watch the live feed of Kayla's room. She was sleeping peacefully, her blanket pulled up to her chin, her stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm. Around 11 p.m., I heard Jackson turn off the TV. His heavy footsteps moved through the house to the kitchen, the bathroom, then finally up the stairs. He came into our bedroom, the smell of beer preceding him. I closed my eyes and pretended to be asleep. The bed dipped as he climbed in. Within minutes, his breathing grew heavy and rhythmic. I lay there in the darkness, every nerve in my body on high alert. Midnight passed. Then 12:30 a.m. I heard him stir. The mattress shifted. I kept my eyes closed, my breathing slow and steady, but my heart was racing. Footsteps. Soft, careful footsteps moving out of our bedroom and down the hallway. I waited 10 seconds, 20. Then I opened my eyes and reached for my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I opened the app, and the feed from Kayla's room appeared on my screen. The nightlight cast a soft glow across her sleeping form. The room was quiet. Then the door opened. Jackson stepped inside. Even in the dim light and grainy footage, I could see the unsteadiness in his movements, the way he swayed slightly as he stood in the doorway. He closed the door behind him with exaggerated care. My breath caught in my throat. My whole body went rigid. Please don't, I thought. Please don't do whatever you're about to do. But he did. He moved to the side of her bed and stood there for a moment, looking down at her sleeping form. Then he reached down and yanked the blanket off her. Kayla jolted awake with a gasp. "You think you're so special, don't you?" His voice was slurred, venomous. Even through my phone's tiny speaker, I could hear the rage in it. "Think you're better than me? Think you can just ignore me?" "Daddy, Her small voice was thick with sleep and fear. "Don't daddy me. You don't respect me. Your mother doesn't respect me. Nobody in this house respects me." He slammed his hand down on her dresser, and the sound made me flinch, even through the phone. Kayla scrambled back against her headboard, pulling her knees to her chest. I worked my whole life to provide for this family. And what do I get? Nothing. You act like I'm nothing." "I'm sorry," Kayla whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry, Daddy. Please." "You're always sorry." "Sorry doesn't mean anything." He stood there, his fists clenched at his sides, his whole body radiating fury. Kayla sat frozen, tears streaming down her face, her small frame trembling. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. Jackson turned and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. Kayla stayed curled up against the headboard, crying silently into her knees, her whole body shaking. I sat in my bed, staring at my phone screen, watching my daughter cry alone in the dark, and I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking, my vision blurred with tears. A sound escaped my throat, something between a sob and a scream, and I clamped my hand over my mouth to muffle it. How long had this been happening? How many nights had he gone into her room while I slept, oblivious, just down the hall? How many times had she cried herself to sleep, terrified and alone, while I convinced myself everything was fine? I watched through tear-filled eyes as Kayla finally lay back down, pulling her blanket up to her chin, her small body still trembling. She didn't close her eyes. She just stared at the ceiling, her face streaked with tears, waiting for morning. And I knew with absolute devastating certainty that my daughter had been living in hell while I'd been too blind, too tired, too determined to keep our family together to see it. The truth didn't set me free. It shattered me. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Kayla's face, her terror, her tears, the way she'd curled up against the headboard like she was trying to disappear. I lay there in the darkness beside Jackson, listening to him snore, and I felt nothing but cold, pure rage. This man, the man I'd married, the man I'd trusted with our daughter's life, had been terrorizing her while I worked myself to exhaustion trying to keep our family afloat. And he'd been doing it for God knows how long. When the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, I got up quietly and went downstairs. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, the video file queued up and ready, and I waited. Kayla came down first, around 7 a.m., already dressed for school. When she saw me sitting there, something flickered across her face, hope, maybe, or fear. She couldn't tell yet which way this day would go. "Morning, baby," I said softly. "Come here." She came to me, and I pulled her into a hug, holding her tight, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "I love you so much," I whispered into her hair. "You know that, right? More than anything in this world." She nodded against my shoulder, and I felt her small body relax, just slightly. "I need you to go upstairs and pack a bag, okay? Just some clothes, your favorite things. Can you do that for me?" She pulled back, looking at me with wide, questioning eyes. "Why?" "Just trust me, baby. Go pack a bag." She hesitated for a moment, then nodded and went back upstairs. I heard Jackson moving around above me, the creak of the bed, footsteps across the floor, the bathroom door closing. My hands tightened around my coffee mug. 20 minutes later, he came downstairs, rubbing his eyes, looking hungover and irritable. "Morning," he muttered, heading straight for the coffee pot. "Sit down, Jackson." Something in my voice made him stop, He turned to look at me, his brow furrowed. "What?" I said, "Sit down." He poured his coffee and came to the table, eyeing me warily as he sat across from me. "What's going on?" I didn't answer. I just turned the laptop around so the screen faced him and pressed play. The footage was grainy, shot in night vision, but crystal clear in its content. Jackson stumbling into Kayla's room, ripping off her blanket, his slurred, venomous words cutting through the quiet house. The slam of his hand on the dresser, Kayla's small, terrified form curled up against the headboard, crying. I watched his face as he watched the screen, watched the color drain from his cheeks, watched his jaw go slack, watched his hands start to tremble around his coffee mug. When the video ended, when Jackson stormed out and Kayla was left alone, crying, I closed the laptop with a soft click. The silence that followed was suffocating. "Latisha." His voice came out hoarse. "I can explain." "Explain?" The word came out sharp, cold. "Explain what, exactly? Explain why you've been going into our daughter's room at night to scream at her? Explain why a 10-year-old child is terrified of her own father?" I wasn't. He ran his hands over his face. "I was drunk. I didn't mean." "You didn't mean what? To terrorize her? To make her so afraid she can't sleep, can't eat, can't function?" "I was just trying to discipline her." His voice rose, defensive now. "She's been disrespectful, and you're always at work, and somebody has to—" "Discipline? Discipline?" I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. "You call that discipline? Screaming at a child in the middle of the night while you're stone cold drunk? Slamming things, making her cry herself to sleep?" "I never touched her," he shouted. "I never laid a hand on her." "You didn't have to." My voice cracked, and I felt tears burning in my eyes. "You scared her, Jackson. You made her afraid in her own home, in her own room, the one place she should feel safe." He stared at me, his face flushed, his hands clenched into fists on the table. "You don't understand. The stress I've been under not working, feeling useless. I don't care." My voice was quiet now, but it cut through his excuses like a knife. "I don't care what you've been going through. You were supposed to protect her, Jackson. You were her father, and I was supposed to protect her from you." The words hung in the air between us. "Latisha, please." He stood up, reaching for me. "I'm sorry. I'll stop drinking. I'll get help. We can fix this." "No." I stepped back, pulling away from him. "We can't. You need to leave. Pack your things and get out." "This is my house too." His voice rose again, angry now. "You can't just kick me out." "Watch me." I pulled my phone from my pocket and held it up. "I will call the police right now. I will show them this video. And then you won't just be leaving, you'll be leaving in handcuffs. Is that what you want?" His face went white. For a moment, we just stood there, staring at each other across the kitchen table, two strangers who'd once promised to love each other forever. "You're really going to do this?" he said quietly. I should have done it a long time ago. He stood there for another moment, his jaw working, his hands trembling. Then he turned and stormed toward the front door. "Fine," he shouted. "You want me gone? I'm gone." The door slammed so hard the windows rattled. And then there was silence. I stood in the kitchen, my whole body shaking, tears streaming down my face. It was over. After all these years, after everything we'd been through together, it was over in less than 10 minutes. "Mama?" I turned to see Kayla standing in the doorway, her backpack on her shoulders, her eyes red and puffy. She'd heard everything. I crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into my arms, holding her so tight I was afraid I might hurt her. "It's okay, baby," I whispered into her hair, my voice breaking. "It's over. He's gone. You're safe now." She sobbed against my chest, her small hands clutching my shirt. "We're leaving tomorrow," I whispered. "We're going to Aunt Carla's, just you and me, and you're never going to be afraid again. I promise you that. I promise." We stood there in the kitchen, holding each other while the morning light streamed through the windows, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could finally breathe. The nightmare was over. Now the healing could begin. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Kayla's terrified face on that grainy camera footage, heard Jackson's slurred voice cutting through the darkness, felt the weight of all those months I'd failed to see what was happening right under my own roof. At 4:30 a.m., while the house was still cloaked in darkness and Charleston slept, I got up and began packing. 2 duffel bags, one for me, one for Kayla. I moved through our bedroom like a ghost, pulling clothes from drawers as quietly as possible, my hands shaking with each item I folded. Jackson hadn't come back. Part of me wondered if he would. Part of me feared it. By 5:15, both bags were packed and waiting by the front door. I climbed the stairs to Kayla's room, my heart hammering against my ribs. The nightlight, that damned nightlight with its hidden camera, still glowed softly on her nightstand, casting gentle shadows across her sleeping face. She looked so small, so innocent. How had I let this happen to her? "Baby," I whispered, kneeling beside her bed and gently touching her shoulder. "Wake up, sweetheart." Her eyes fluttered open, immediately alert, immediately afraid. That automatic fear broke something in me all over again. "It's okay," I said quickly, brushing her hair back from her forehead. "Don't be scared, baby. We're going somewhere safe, somewhere he can't find us." Understanding dawned in her eyes. She sat up slowly, looking at me with a mixture of hope and disbelief. "Really? Really? Aunt Carla's expecting us, but we need to leave now, before the sun comes up. Can you get dressed quickly?" She nodded and practically jumped out of bed, moving faster than I'd seen her move in months. While she pulled on jeans and a sweatshirt, I grabbed her packed bag from the hallway and her favorite stuffed rabbit from the bed. 10 minutes later, we were in the car, pulling out of our driveway as the first hints of dawn painted the sky purple and pink. I drove with my hands gripped tight on the steering wheel, checking the rearview mirror every few seconds, half expecting to see Jackson's truck barreling after us. But the road behind us stayed empty. We were 20 minutes into the drive when Kayla finally spoke. Her voice came out small and broken in the quiet car. "I thought you didn't care." The words hit me like a physical blow. I had to blink back tears to keep my eyes on the road. "What?" I managed to whisper. "When Daddy would come in at night," she said, her voice trembling. "And you never came. I thought maybe you knew, and you didn't care." I pulled the car over onto the shoulder so abruptly the tires squealed. I turned to face her, tears streaming down my face, and reached for her hands. "Baby, no. Oh God, no." My voice broke completely. "I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know. If I had known, if I had seen what was happening, I would have stopped it the very first time. I would have protected you." "But you do now?" she asked, her eyes searching mine. "You believe me now?" "I believe you. I see you. And you're never going to be alone again. I promise you that. I promise." She launched herself across the center console and into my arms, sobbing against my shoulder. I held her tight, rocking her back and forth, both of us crying in that pulled-over car as the sun rose over South Carolina. An hour later, we pulled into Carla's driveway. My sister must have been watching for us, because before I even turned off the engine, she was running out her front door in her bathrobe, her face lined with worry and love. She pulled open Kayla's door and swept my daughter into her arms. "Oh, baby girl. Oh, sweetheart. You're safe now. You're safe." Then she reached for me, and the 3 of us stood there in her driveway, holding each other while the neighborhood woke up around us. And for the first time in months, I felt like we could finally breathe. Inside, Carla made hot chocolate and cinnamon toast, Kayla's favorite. While my daughter ate, her eyelids growing heavy with exhaustion and relief, I told Carla everything: the drinking, the the yelling, the footage, the confrontation. When I finished, Carla reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You did the right thing. You saved her." Later, after Kayla had fallen asleep in the guest room, really, truly asleep, without fear or nightlights or doors left cracked open, I stood in the doorway watching her chest rise and fall with deep, peaceful breaths. "We're free now," I whispered into the quiet room, "and I'll never stop protecting you. Never again." I pulled the door closed softly and walked downstairs, ready to begin the hardest and most important work of my life, helping my daughter heal from the nightmare we'd finally escaped. The calls started 2 days after we left. My phone would light up with Jackson's name, again and again, until I finally blocked his number. Then he started calling from different numbers I didn't recognize until I heard his voice on the voicemail, slurred and desperate. "Latisha, please. We can work this out. I'm sorry, I'll get help, just come home." I deleted every message without listening to the end. Through Carla's neighbor, who still lived on our old street in Charleston, I heard pieces of what was happening back at the house. Jackson had been fired from the part-time warehouse job he'd finally gotten 3 months ago. Showed up drunk, they said. Got into an argument with his supervisor. The house went on the market 6 weeks after we left. He couldn't afford the mortgage on his own, couldn't hold down work long enough to matter. I felt nothing when Carla showed me the listing online. That house, those rooms, that kitchen where we'd once been a family, it all felt like it belonged to someone else's life now. My lawyer filed for full custody within the first month. Jackson didn't even show up to the hearing. The judge granted my petition without contest, adding a restraining order that required him to stay at least 500 feet away from both Kayla and me. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I just felt tired. The real work began in Dr. Morrison's office on a Thursday afternoon in late spring. She was a child psychologist who specialized in trauma, recommended by Kayla's school counselor. Her office was warm and filled with plants, with a shelf of toys and art supplies in the corner. "Kayla," Dr. Morrison said gently during our first session, "can you tell me about your bedroom at your old house?" I watched my daughter's face close up immediately, her small hands twisting in her lap. "I don't want to talk about it." "That's okay. We don't have to talk about anything you're not ready for." "Doctor." Morrison smiled and pulled out a box of crayons and paper. "Would you like to draw instead?" Over the weeks that followed, the sessions revealed layers of trauma I hadn't fully understood. The nightmares that still woke Kayla up screaming. The way loud voices made her shut down completely. The guilt she carried, believing somehow that she'd done something wrong, that she deserved Jackson's rage. "Children often internalize their trauma, Doctor," Morrison explained to me during one of my individual sessions. "They make themselves smaller, quieter, trying to become invisible to avoid triggering the abuser." I broke down in that office more times than I could count. The guilt was suffocating. How had I missed it for so long? How had I been so blind? "You were surviving," Dr. Morrison told me. "And now you're healing. Both of you are." The healing came in small moments, tiny victories that felt monumental. The first time Kayla laughed, really laughed, the kind that made her double over, was at Carla's dinner table when my sister told a ridiculous story about her cat getting stuck in the laundry basket. The sound was so unexpected, so pure, that I started crying right there over my plate of spaghetti. She started drawing again, filling sketch pads with colorful pictures of flowers and rainbows and houses with hearts over the doors. She stuck them on the refrigerator in Carla's kitchen, slowly covering every inch of stainless steel with her art. She asked if Maya and Jasmine could come visit. When they did, I heard giggling coming from the guest room that had become Kayla's room, and I had to step outside to catch my breath because the relief was so overwhelming. I started rebuilding too. A smaller catering business, working out of Carla's kitchen at first, then eventually renting a small commercial space 2 miles away. Latisha's kitchen, I called it. Simple, honest, mine. The work was therapeutic, creating something beautiful, feeding people, building something from nothing. It reminded me that I was capable of more than just surviving. I could thrive. We both could. 6 months after we left, during a Thursday afternoon session, Dr. Morrison asked Kayla the same question she asked every week. "How are you feeling today?" Kayla looked up from the drawing she was working on, a picture of her and me holding hands under a bright yellow sun, and said something that stopped my heart. "I'm not scared anymore." 3 simple words, 5 syllables, but they contained everything. Dr. Morrison smiled gently. "That's wonderful, Kayla. What changed?" Kayla glanced at me, and in her eyes I saw something I hadn't seen in so long I'd almost forgotten what it looked like. Peace. "Mom sees me now," she said softly, "and she's not going anywhere." I couldn't hold back the tears. They spilled down my cheeks as I reached for my daughter's hand across the small table. "Never," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I'm never going anywhere, I promise." Kayla squeezed my hand and went back to her drawing, adding flowers around our stick figure feet. Dr. Morrison caught my eye and nodded slightly, a small smile on her face. We weren't all the way healed. The scars were still there, still tender. There would be hard days ahead, setbacks and struggles and moments when the past tried to pull us back under. But we were free. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, we were both finally breathing. 2 years have passed since that early morning drive to Carla's house. 2 years since we left everything behind and started over. I'm writing this now from our small apartment overlooking Charleston Harbor. It's nothing fancy, just 2 bedrooms, a galley kitchen, and a balcony where Kayla and I eat breakfast on Sunday mornings, watching the boats drift by. But it's ours. Every inch of it is safe, and warm, and filled with light. Kayla is 12 now. 12 years old and thriving in ways I once feared might never be possible. She made honor roll last semester. She joined the art club at school and came home last week with a painting that's now hanging over our couch, a sunset over water, all oranges and purples and hope. She still sees Dr. Morrison once a month, maintenance sessions we call them. The nightmares are rare now, maybe once every few months instead of every night. She sleeps with her door open because she wants to, not because she's afraid. In my bedroom, tucked in the back of my nightstand drawer beneath old receipts and forgotten birthday cards, I keep that hidden camera. The crescent moon nightlight that captured the truth I'd been too afraid to see. I don't look at it often, but I keep it there as a reminder not of pain, but of courage. Of the moment I chose to stop pretending and face what was really happening. Of the night I decided that protecting my daughter mattered more than protecting my marriage, my pride, or the illusion of a perfect family. Sometimes, courage looks like installing a hidden camera at 2 a.m. while your hands shake so badly you can barely plug it in. If you're reading this story, if you've made it this far, I need you to hear something important. If something feels wrong in your home, trust that feeling. Don't wait for proof. Don't tell yourself you're overreacting or being paranoid. Don't make excuses for the person hurting someone you love, even if that person is someone you once loved too. The moment you start pretending, the truth becomes your enemy. And the longer you pretend, the more damage gets done to the people who can't protect themselves. I pretended for months. I told myself Jackson was just struggling, just stressed, just going through a hard time. I convinced myself that working harder, holding tighter, being more patient would somehow fix what was broken. But some things can't be fixed. Some people won't change, no matter how much you love them or how hard you try. And your first responsibility, your only responsibility, is to protect the innocent. I saw Jackson once, about 6 months ago. I was driving through our old neighborhood, taking a shortcut to a catering event, when I spotted him on a park bench near the elementary school Kayla used to attend. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair unkempt. He was staring at nothing, a paper bag beside him that I knew probably contained a bottle. For a moment, I thought about stopping, about rolling down my window and asking if he was okay, if he needed help, if he'd gotten sober, if he ever thought about what he'd done. But I didn't stop. I drove past, my hands steady on the wheel, my eyes forward. Because some bridges need to burn completely before you can truly move on. I forgave him silently in my heart, not for his sake, but for mine. Holding on to anger and hatred would only poison me from the inside out. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean letting him back into our lives or pretending the damage wasn't real. It just means I'm no longer carrying his burden. I'm free of it. We both are. Last Sunday morning, Kayla and I took our dog, a golden retriever puppy we'd adopted 3 months earlier, for a walk along the harbor. The sun was bright, the air warm and salty, and Kayla was telling me some elaborate story about a project she was working on with her friends at school. She was laughing, her face tilted up toward the sun, her eyes bright and clear and completely, utterly unafraid. I watched her skip ahead with the dog, and something inside my chest loosened, that last tight knot of guilt and fear I'd been carrying finally unraveling. "Mom, come on," she called back to me, waving. "You're so slow." I laughed and jogged to catch up, and as I did, I thought about how far we'd come. About the woman I'd been 2 years ago, exhausted, blind, desperate to hold together something that was already broken. I used to think love meant holding on to marriage vows, to promises made, to the idea of family no matter what the cost. Now I know love sometimes means letting go before darkness takes everything you care about. Love means having the courage to see the truth, even when it destroys everything you thought you knew. Love means choosing the vulnerable over the familiar. Love means being brave enough to start over, even when you're terrified and exhausted and don't know how you'll survive. We did survive. We did more than survive. We rebuilt. We healed. We became something stronger than we were before. And if you're watching this from a place of fear, from a home where something feels wrong, where someone small and innocent is hurting while you tell yourself it's not that bad, please, please hear me. It is that bad. Trust your instincts. Install the camera. Make the call. Pack the bags. Leave before it's too late. Your child is watching you, waiting to see if you'll choose them, waiting to know if they matter more than your fear, your pride, your comfort. Choose them. Every single time, choose them. Because 2 years from now, you'll be walking on a sunny morning with your child beside you, laughing, thriving, free, and you'll realize that letting go of what was destroying you was the most loving thing you could have ever done. To every parent watching this, watch, listen, trust your gut. Your story doesn't have to end in darkness. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is turn on the light. If this story resonated with you, please share it. Someone in your life might need to hear it. Someone might be waiting for permission to be brave. Leave a comment below and tell me, where are you watching from? What time is it where you are? Let's remind each other that we're not alone in this fight to protect the ones we love. Thank you for watching my story. Thank you for seeing us. With love and hope, Latisha Combs, Charleston, South Carolina.